APFTV. The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect views and opinions of APFTV or AP Foundation. Viewer discretion advised. Some programs on this network might include strong images and language and may not be suitable for all audiences.
So first of all, can you give me your name, your age, and what you were convicted of?
My name is Nabil Rashid. I'm in my early 30s, and I was convicted of breaking the law.
And what was your sentence for breaking the law?
I ended up getting 3 years. So
Right.
not so long, but I was looking at a lot longer.
Okay. Can you describe to me your experience when you went into prison, what it was like, and what kind of people you were surrounded by?
Oh man, the food was terrible, and like the lighting, the decor, I did not like it at all. No, my experiences in prison, to be honest with you, it's probably the most, I don't want to say cosmopolitan, but it was a melting pot. There were all types of people there. Every kind of life story, every kind of person, every nationality you can think of, I met in there. And they varied from the bumbling fool who got into a bad situation to the career criminal to the raving lunatic. Because I went in at a time when prisons were crowded. I was actually too young. I wasn't meant to be in prison, but the crowding in the young offenders was so much that they had to send me to a BCAT prison. I then turned 21 while I was inside. Oh, it was a very grim experience, man. It was a very grim experience.
In your opinion, from the people you were surrounded by, what were some of the most common reasons that they had gotten into crime in the first place?
Most of the guys in there were in for minor offenses. Majority of them came from broken homes. Very low income. A lot of the time, drugs were a catalyst to why they were in. The prisons are full of people who are addicted to substances or have, and another big reason why people were in prison was down to debt, financial issues, fines. And then after that, you've got like your GBH type thing. There was a lot of people in there for violent offenses and shoplifting, things like that. A lot of these people were not what I would describe as prolific career criminals. They were more down and outs, and then a particular incident led to them going to prison, if that makes sense.
You mentioned in another interview that we did that you came from a well-meaning family. You were well-raised. What do you think the factors were that pushed you towards crime in the first place?
So, like many young Nigerian boys, I moved to the UK in my late teens to further my education, because at the time there were strikes going on in Nigeria, and also I was born in England. I'm a British citizen. I just grew up. I spent my teens in Nigeria, right? And I wasn't living with an actual family member. I was living with somebody who was supposed to watch over me, but didn't. They just, and I was in a new environment, no friends or family, very, very new culture around me. And pretty much in the environment I found myself, which was an estate, a council estate, a very notorious one at that, it was a case of when in Rome, because if you try to stand out on your own, you're just going to be a victim. Avoid getting into those kind of situations. So it pretty much was an eventuality. It was just something that, I feel maybe if my family, the type of family that I have, was here in England, maybe I'd have had more of a chance to navigate. But even then, it was one of those things. That environment, there wasn't much I could do to escape falling into the wrong crowd.
After you came out of prison, you have gone into comedy now. Can you tell me a bit about what your journey into comedy was like and when it started for you?
I mean, so it's an interesting thing because though as I've gotten older, I don't know, with me, the older I get, the more memories from my childhood I start to recall, right? I know it's supposed to work backwards. You get older and your memory gets worse, but, you know, I'm obviously a higher form of life. But anyway, I remember that as a kid, growing up, I have childhood memories of watching Richard Pryor and Rowan Atkinson. Funny enough, I didn't even realize he did stand up, but he actually has a 1 hour special of him on stage by himself doing all these characters. And I remember watching that and thinking, comedy is so cool. I wish I could stand on stage in front of all these people and, you know, joke and make people laugh, and that would be my job. And fortunately, growing up, you know, again, in the kind of family, you know, you had, you know, my dad is a doctor, right? So growing up, it was Nabil. When you grow up, you can be any type of doctor that you want to be. That was the kind of childhood I had. There was no, you know, there was no army, no musician, no. It was very clear. We all were meant to be professionals. Like in my household, one of my siblings wanted to be a lawyer and got looked down on for wanting to be a lawyer. It was meant doctor, doctor, right? So in my heart, I always wanted to do comedy or some kind of performing art, but I just felt it was impossible to get into at that time. Growing up in Nigeria, our movie and music industry and comedy industry had not blown up the way it has now. So that was always something innate. So while in prison, stupid story, but in fact, I even remember doing impressions in the police car when I was being taken, and the officers were laughing. You know, I've always been that kind of guy. I've always been that guy that, you know the character in the film that always is always wisecracking, even when we're in danger. That was me. You know, even in the most violent situations, I would always see humor. You know, even in the most messed up situations. And I remember in prison we were lining up to go and get food, and I was talking to one of my friends. I was telling him a story, and the guy behind me is cracking up. And then someone in front turns around and says, "You know what? When you come out of prison, you should look into getting into stand-up comedy." I was like, "Really?" He's like, "Yeah, because I used to book shows before I came here, and you're funnier than half the guys I paid to do comedy." And I was like, "Really? Could you hook me up when I come?" I say, "Oh, no, I'm a drug dealer now." But I'm just saying, maybe if I had more guys like you, I would have had some drugs. And I always stuck with you. Then when I did my creative writing course, you know, it was the same thing. I wrote poetry and I did all this stuff. But when I performed it, the whole class was laughing. And I was in the high risk sector. I was around murderers and gang members and all kinds of people. And I still make them laugh. In fact, one of the prison officers used to come and open my door early just so I could take the piss out of him and his colleagues. Right? Like we always used to, because, you know, normally they would make up funny nicknames for inmates, but I was the only guy that would give it back to them. So they would tell us, "Oh, that guy you see that guy in the high risk section over there, that guy's hilarious, man. Let's go." So they come and open my door and be like, "Hey, look at your face." I'm like, "Yeah, well, look at your shoe." And I would just start rinsing all the guards and they would crack up. So they just said, "You know, when you go out in the bill, you really, really need to try and do stand-up comedy." And I was like, "Yeah, whatever." So come out of prison within a week, I'm at uni. I've gotten myself onto a drama and applied theatre course. I've got myself a job as well. And where I was working, there was another guy, and this is very important actually that I mentioned this. There was another guy working with me, and he was an aspiring actor. And another guy was a DJ, and he played one of his mixes, and there was an advert for an open mic night for comedy, right? Like, "Oh, if you think you're any good, why don't you come down to this talent show?" So I was like, "Oh, yeah, I could do that. It's a sign." So I went and I tried out, and I'm not going to lie, that was the most embarrassing day of my life. You know how most comedians tell you their first show is fantastic? Lies! My first show was terrible. It was terrible. It was like deciding you want to take up boxing and you go to the ring and there's an angry Mike Tyson waiting for you. That's what happened to me. It was terrible. Look, the show was so bad. The only person in the audience laughing was my brother, and he was laughing at me, right? And then after the show, he's driving me home. We stop, we get some Nigerian food. He drives me to the door of my house, and he's like, "Nabil, the best advice I can give you is enjoy your food." and then he drove off. That was my introduction to comedy. And because I'm stubborn, 9 months later I tried again, right? One
Oh,
house.
hang on,
I went
Nabil.
well. I ended up
Sorry, Nabil. One sec.
getting.
We're losing you a bit because of the internet. So we got you at 9 months later.
So hold
You're
on.
hard-headed. So you tried again.
Is it my Wi-Fi or yours?
It's yours, I believe.
No, it's not me. It's you. Okay. No. So 9 months later, I 9 months later, I tried out at a place called Kojo's Comedy Fun House, right? By a comedian who actually, there was a comedian who was just on Britain's Got Talent last year, went through to the finals. He ran a comedy club back then. And I went there because it was a place to go. Like if you wanted to watch comedy, you went to Kojo's. And somehow, by one of my colleagues knew a comedian that performed there, whose name was Baba Tunde. So I called him. He got me a spot. I did really well that day. I got given a number to call a guy called Jeff Schumann, who was on Choice FM radio back in the day. I don't know if you know about Choice FM, if that's your kind of thing. You know, that was a very big radio show, and Jeff Schumann was, I think, a presenter on it, but he did comedy. And I called him and asked, could I come and do a set at your comedy club? And he said, sure. If I like you, I'll book you. If I don't, I won't. And I went there. I was meant to do 5 minutes. I ended up doing half an hour on stage. Just, I had him in stitches, and he became my mentor. And whenever he went on tour, he'd take me. Whenever he had a show he couldn't do, he would send me, and he really helped me build my confidence and had a huge influence on the style of comedy that I have now.
Fantastic.
Sorry,
So as someone, oh, it's okay. As someone who, I know believes in rehabilitation, and as a mentor, I feel that you had a second chance at life because you've gotten into something that you love after your stint in prison. Now, there are some people out there who would say that there are people with a disadvantaged life that never turn to crime. Why should ex-offenders be given a chance at life again? Why should they have a second chance? What would you say to them?
I would say that people are very, very conceited to think that it's such a huge step to fall into crime. Crime and homelessness are two things that anybody can fall into. Prison and homelessness are two things that you're only one decision away from falling into. Case in point, you, Kat, you seem like a very well-mannered and friendly person. I'm sure you wouldn't hurt a fly. But I'm sure that if someone caught you on the wrong day, if you were outside, say, Tesco's or whatever the main supermarkets are over there in the sunny Philippines, say you were in London and someone got in your face and spat in your face or attacked you, and you defended yourself by hitting them, and they fell and hit their head on the floor, right? Now, if for whatever reason you're too upset to articulate yourself properly to the police officer that comes to ask what happened, or God forbid, that person has 3 friends that are witnesses, and you end up going to prison for ABH, right? And then you lose your career, wherever it is at the time, you lose your career all because of this one mistake. That's an easy way to go to jail. An easy way to go to jail is driving, and then you're upset about something and you're crying, and because of that, you miss a red light and you end up running someone over or crashing into someone's car, and then you get arrested for dangerous driving. And again, disadvantaged backgrounds vary, right? I know, like, there's a family across the road, it's only a 3-bed, but there's like 9 of them living there. But there's a loving mother, a loving father, there's a culture, there are relatives, there's a support system. These kids are supervised. They may not have much, but they have the most important thing, love and affection, right? They're still disadvantaged because they may not have as much financial help or wealth as other people. But those kids are less likely to get into crime because they have that. Whereas there might be somebody from a well-off family, but their mom's an alcoholic who beats them every day. Their dad's not there. Their father is not there. Their older siblings are abusive too. So because of that, they don't spend time at home. They're outside. They don't want to go home because they're scared to go home. There's never anything to eat in the house. The house is not a place of peace. The house is a place of torment. They don't want to go there. They're terrified. They have PTSD just from what their parents do and say to them every day. So they go outside, they're still a child. They still need a brother. They still need a mother. They still need a father. They still need affection. But where do they find it? Someone waiting for them outside a chicken shop who says, hey, you look a bit scruffy. Are you okay? Here, let me buy some food for you. The next day, that person buys them a pair of trainers, a t-shirt, more clothes, gives them money, puts it in their pocket, then says, oh, could you hold this package for me? What's in that package? They get stopped and searched by police one day. They're carrying drugs. That's how easy it is to get into crime. It's not just one route. There's so many routes that can lead people to prison. You know, and I feel we're too judgmental as a society. When we hear someone's been to prison, we never think, how? What would I have done in that situation? You know, it's a lot like now, even with things like the COVID, right? The reason we're all indoors. Many of us sit down. There's people here who still believe it's not real. It doesn't exist. But on the other side of things, there are people who've lost 3 relatives. I saw a video of a guy who lost his father, his uncle, and his grandfather in a space of 2 days to this disease. So I would advise people who have that view that just because something hasn't affected you doesn't mean it's not real or valid. Rather, you should be grateful that you're not in a situation where that has become a reality for you. It's the same, you know, like, again, something I talk about a lot is things like child safety, you know, which then feeds into women's safety as well, in terms of things like abuse, whether it be sexual or physical. A lot of people don't take these things seriously because they haven't experienced it. And a lot of the time, whenever women report these things, people try and look for a way for it to be the woman's fault, and they victim blame. Oh, but why was she there? What was she doing there? You weren't there. That situation is real, and it affects hundreds, if not thousands of people, but we only hear the stories of the lucky few that are able to tell them. So, you know, I'm sorry, I get a bit passionate when it comes to this, but I just think that sometimes people are blind to their own privilege.
I absolutely agree. Fantastic answer. I already know that you're pro-reform, of course, but I do want to ask you, why do you feel reform and rehabilitation in prisons is absolutely necessary to stop people from reoffending when they come out of prison?
I mean, if we don't believe in rehabilitation and reform, then there's no point in even having a prison, is there? We might as well just give people, you know, we might as well just be capital punishment for every single offense, like in the Old Testament. You know, the whole point, I feel, if you're going to do something, do it properly. If you're going to build these huge prisons and invest millions in them, at least make sure they bloody work. Make sure that the people that go in there come out. Because at the end of the day, it's better for our society. It's better for our economy. It's better for our educational system. I feel if we don't try and make the prison process more refined and efficient, there's no point in having a prison system. There's no point in sending thousands of people, or you know, in America's case, millions of people to prison, and then having no plan B, having nothing, no destined achievement with them. We can't just write people off, because again, the things that lead to prison in most cases are so trivial. And for every person that's gone to jail for a certain crime, there's somebody that didn't. So in some cases, people don't even need to be rehabilitated. Some people are just in prison because they made a mistake that was out of character. And a lot of the time, prison ends up creating criminals. So I think rehabilitation is very important, because as a society, you know, we complain about things like lack of labor forces in certain areas. We complain about brain drain and things like that. But in prison, I personally saw so many people with all kinds of potential, but it was wasted because they were in there. And in a lot of cases, they will continue to go back in there because the right facilities are not in place to stop them from reoffending.
Right. Now, why do you think a platform like AP Foundation is so integral in giving ex-offenders a second chance at life?
Well, I think because, you know, it's spearheaded by somebody who's been there and done that. I think in that in itself is the most important thing for me as someone who's been through the system, because there are a lot of organizations out there run by people who are reading stuff out of the book and have no clue what they're talking about, haven't experienced what it is that the people they're talking to have experienced. You know, so I think organizations like this are integral. Also because I like the fact that it incorporates a lot of different types of people from different walks of life with different experiences and skills to touch, because I found when I was working more in when we co-founded Pathways, for example, I found that a lot of other organizations just didn't understand the fact that we weren't a one-size-fits-all approach to dealing with clients. But it's like there are so many different entrances and exits into these issues. We can't just have a one, like you've got all these young offenders houses, you've got all these supported housing organizations where literally it's just they dump people off in a house, give them a social worker that comes in, listens to their problems and does nothing. That approach does not work. It has to be dynamic, and that's what the APF is. It's dynamic. It's got different people. It's all things to all people, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. And just one more thing, if you could give a message to young people to deter them from going down the same road that you did, what would you say to
them? There is always a better option. That's one. And, when you do anything, you have to ask yourself why you're doing it, what you're going to gain from it. And you have to look at I like to look at probabilities. Look at everybody that was around before you that did the same things you're doing or about to do now, and ask yourself, how many of these guys are better for it, right? So say you want to go and you want to join a gang, right? How many gang members do you know that grew up to be millionaires? We watch all these movies like Scarface, and then how did he end up, right? Even though he got the success you're looking for, how did he even The Godfather, how did he end up? But how many guys do you know from your estate that shot in and gangbanging that actually end up living the life that you falsify in your, in your persona online or in your bars that you write when you rap? How many guys actually live that? And then those that do live that, look at how they actually live if you're close to them. How many of them now can no longer go to certain areas? How many of them now have to live life looking over their shoulder? Is that what you want? And then, I think even though a lot of these guys will still go on and make these mistakes, I hope they revisit what I'm saying. If it's not worth it, don't risk it. There's always a better option. You may not look like, you might not look certy right now. You might not look hard right now. But in the long run, the smarter option always pays off.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Nabil. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. Salamat po.